Summit, that is part of the economy.
Who wears several hats, one of the talk show host, reality show judge, writer, but one hat that suits him perfectly is that of a filmmaker. And also Mr. Girish Menon, Director of Media and Entertainment, KPMG India. Kindly put your hands together for him too.
Thank you very much. So I understand that our session sort of got preponed, and thank you for sort of accommodating us. The theme of this conference really is around digital transformation, and this session particularly covers the impact of digital technology and changes in technology on filmmaking, and also particularly on the art of filmmaking. And it's my privilege to have this conversation today with Karan Johar, who needs no introduction, and just to share his insights on this particular aspect. Let me just sort of dive into it, and thank you so much, Karan, for making it today. So I think a good way to sort of get into this would be that it's been about 20 years since you sort of released your first movie. And in that context, what have you really seen changing over the last 20 years in terms of how has technology really impacted how you approach your movies and how you really make your movies?
Firstly, good evening. Thank you for accommodating us a little earlier. Apologies if that caused any inconvenience. To answer your question, I'm one of the rare few people who kind of made that shift. Me and Aditya Chopra, I think two filmmakers. Aditya had a film released in 1995 called Dil Bale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, and I debuted in 1998 with Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. So there's been a sea change and transformation within the film fraternity when it comes to technology and it comes to the way we make movies. I don't even know, we actually used to edit our films on the Steenbeck, which was not even the digital format of editing, which is like the primitive almost method of editing, which we did right through Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. It was only a year after that, in 1999, where the Avid, which is the digitally driven, technology-driven format of editing. So I was one of those rare people from the current lot of filmmakers who actually edited my film, like literally, like scissor in hand. It was literally
both sides.
I have. Even in terms of equipment and everything else, and when the Avid came on, it was like everyone was so trigger happy. It was like everyone was trying all kinds of things, moving things in different frames and fade outs and blurs, and suddenly everybody was more excited with the advent of technology within our realm of things. It's only when things relaxed that we understood that this is here to stay and what to do with it. So as I said, so much has changed. I don't know how to answer that question to you without really kind of conducting an opera, because from the editing formats to the arrival of computer graphics in our life, to everything, the way we make movies, see movies, the viewing experience, everything has been like phenomenal. The whole change has been completely diametrically phenomenal.
I understand. You're right. It's interesting if you see there are multiple areas where possibly there has been a significant change in the way technology is evolved. And what we probably do is maybe pick up 2 or 3 areas where, and maybe just talk a little bit and get your views around that. First is let's start with the core of a lot of this is really the advent of digital cameras and how that's moved away from traditional formats of shooting.
Right.
How has that really changed how you approach, right?
Well, it's the death of celluloid, right? It's really the term we used all through our formative years as student filmmakers and then as initial filmmakers. We called it celluloid.
Right.
It's no longer celluloid. We are all digital. So everything is like, we used to wait for a magazine to change,
right.
And we used to be a big deal. Now we change our tapes.
Right.
And there's so much that can happen. Everything is a button away.
Right.
You want to go brighter, want to go wider, want to go tighter, want to go softer, want to go anything.
Right.
You go digital, you open up the Torah. As a the poetic part of me feels shattered with
Right.
this new advent, because there was a charm in the way you felt the characters on celluloid. And I know there are filmmakers even today that miss that feeling.
Right.
I just feel like there is something mildly or then sometimes very strongly synthetic about the way the final product is. But it's the order of the day, it's the order of our times.
Right.
And I know that film just felt, I don't know, it just felt special. It
Right.
felt rare, it felt like these characters were in the real world and you were connecting to their lives on an organic and an honest level.
Right.
Today with digital, you just start feeling everything is mildly kind of, there is an artificiality that penetrates through the format and stays there. But of course you can circumvent that, and of course, you know, there are ways and means of even working around digital.
Right.
You know, as we all know that green screen work and computer graphic work is now such a large part. I'm one of those reluctant filmmakers who always reluctant to green screen. And I've just come back from London and had a meeting with the double negative guys who are working with us on a film.
Right.
And the head there, Namit, you know, who owns Prime Focus and has now taken over Double Negative. So Namit was telling me the biggest filmmakers in the world, be it Steven Spielberg, James Cameron, all of them are not so technology savvy, but they understand what it can do for their product.
Right.
You know, they understand that green screen is something not to fear. And there are some like Alfonso Cuarón, who did Gravity,
Yeah.
who actually did not want the green screen at all. Everything was kind of projected.
Right.
You know, he did not want anything green. So there are filmmakers who don't like the idea of
Right.
green screen at all.
Right, right.
And there are ways to kind of work around that.
Sure.
And then, you know, when we traveled and worked and spoken to filmmakers, and we speak to filmmakers all over the world, and they tell you that actually it's what you do with computer graphics. It's how you can actually create a world, make it a human drama, make it an emotional film, but you can expand the bandwidth of that story. You know,
Right.
it's what James Cameron did with Titanic is no less than a Hindi film. In
Right.
terms of its ethos, emotional content, melodrama, drama, song, dance, conflict, everything was in the film. But look at what he did with it in 1998.
Right.
Ironically, the same year as my first film debut, Kuch
Right.
Kuch Hota Hai. And there were two love stories with totally two different syntax appeals.
Right.
One, where he took a real life event and put it on this monumental scale with the help of computer graphic and used detailing with the help of graphic that you can't even tell is actually CG work.
Right.
So it's what you do with it. You can
Sure.
still tell your narrative. And I
Right.
think India is a land of emotional content. We're a land that makes beautiful love stories, emotional stories. So we have to take the help of computer graphic, never change and become wannabe or me too's
Right.
of what they're doing, you know?
Right.
Save, I think, one film that actually really can give, as they say, takkar to any of their best work. And that's true because this emotional content is Bahubali.
Yes.
You know, and Bahubali is such a proud experience, and Rajamouli's brilliance and vision. And he worked on that film for over 3 or 4 years before it saw its first version. Save that, I feel today Indian filmmakers must look at it holistically. Take up a theme where they can actually build on it emotionally with the help of CG. And not just go around like trying to create like, you know, epic scale war sequences or like monumental action set pieces, just like there are in the franchise films of Hollywood. You don't need to do that. You can actually take a film, an emotional father-son film, or a husband-wife film, or a love story like Titanic was, and give it that epic feeling with the help of computer graphic. It's what you do with it.
No, fair. So you're essentially saying, use it as a tool rather than be dependent and make movies which are driven by CGI. But
Exactly.
rather
Like,
use it
everything doesn't have to be like,
as enhance your content.
Lord of the Rings or
Right,
Harry Potter.
right,
You know,
right.
everything does not have to be that.
Right.
You can take a simple love story and give it that scale.
Right.
You know, or give it that visual excellence with the help of understanding. The understanding actually is very simple. There are teams led all over the world by some of the brightest minds. And so many of them, will be able to tell you that you should never compromise on emotion.
Right.
Just use that as a peripheral technique.
Understand. So, just to sort of take it from what you said, when we talk CGI, the impression that sort of comes to mind is exactly the kind of stuff you said around big war scenes or scenes which are heavy on special effects. Is there something you can sort of share with us, maybe some of the movies that you've done where you use CGI, you use special effects, but they are so subtle or they're so much used more to sort of enhance a natural content rather than make it so heavy on CGI.
I mean, a lot of the films that I've produced have been low besides what we're making right now.
Right.
If you know, we partnered on some films that have actually had But I mean, there are little things that you can actually do, Girish, that are like simple. Like we can actually have, let me put it into perspective for you, for people who understand film, that we can have actually just a front row of tables, and I can show like an auditorium, literally. If I need to show scale, I don't need to go beyond the front row. We have about 20 gentlemen. It can look like 3,000, and that's the easiest shot in the world.
Right.
So if you want to show scale, you don't need, you can cut costs, you can control budgets, if you actually leverage computer graphics easily. Like it's the insecurity of a filmmaker that stunts your growth. And I think most of us get so afraid of leveraging the facilities of computer graphics. It's simple things, like you can, in my movies, we've done crowd multiplication. Say a film of ours that released last year called Brothers. We had like just one section of people, 200, but we made it look like a stadium full of 10,000 people. And in moving shots, you know, sometimes this used to be possible with just static imagery, but now you can actually move your camera and yet have that crowd multiplication happen efficiently. You know, there are things you can change faces, you can transform images, you can do anything. By the cosmeticness of it, which is also a big part, I have to tell you, of what happens. We can make people look younger, thinner, prettier. I mean, all that is cosmetic, and that is, of course, just a sub-section of what computer graphics can do. But apart from that, it's just creating that magic on celluloid and giving you that epic scale without an epic budget. And I think that efficiency is what we need to start integrating in our zone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's probably the key takeaway from this piece of what we sort of discussed. The other point I just wanted to also chat about with you is, so while pretty much most of what is created is really 2D content in nature. There are fundamentally two other types of visualization. One which has been around for a while, and one which is sort of coming up. One to start with is 3D. Right now, 3D post Avatar, there was a huge buzz around 3D and what it can do, and the fact that it could potentially wipe out 2D filmmaking, and there's a lot of discussion. But it obviously has never really panned out, and globally it's sort of thought that 3D filmmaking has never really reached the kind of potential it could have. Where do you see things that went wrong, or was it always on the cards?
I think 3D is great if your film warrants it.
Right.
I'm not a huge fan of the format, that's just personal and nothing else. I feel like I need to kind of see a film like I've been trained to see it as a child. I feel just with the aid of glasses and have characters come up close, I may not want them. I like to see things at a distance in cinema and then feel up close with content. But I think 3D is a humongous device and is great for certain kinds of films. The epic scale bonanza films, the franchises that are larger than life, the adaptations like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings.
Bahubali did 3D pretty well.
All that Bahubali lends itself to the format again. Just doing it for the sake of doing it and adapting to that format for no reason. But it doesn't mean that you need to kind of do what we used to do with it in New York, like when Chhota Chetan came out. Or there was a film after that called Shiva Ka Insaf, on the heels of Chhota Chetan, where everyone was like kind of trying to come at you. That is gone. That's no longer. Just now you feel the presence of the characters much like in your proximity of vision. For me, I think it needs to be that kind of film. 3D does not ever going to mean the death of 2D. 2D will exist as the paramount way to see a film.
Right.
And 3D will be that add-on, that bonus, like the IMAX experience, apart from 3D, which is the holistic look of a cinema, which is circumvent. And I think that is really something that you need to kind of experience depending on the film. Very few films warrant these additional formats.
Fair enough. Then let's look at something else which is evolving, and again which is become the talk, is really around virtual reality, augmented reality. As a filmmaker, how do you see that? What do you where do you see this being most useful? Where do you see it lending most value? And where do you see this? Because obviously it's very early days for the format and very early days for the technology. Where do you see this, say, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line?
I mean, virtual reality has become a huge, huge phenomenon, and it's kind of gained tremendous ground in the West. We're still understanding it, developing it, and there's so much understanding of it. Short films of 2 and 3 minutes on VR actually are doing phenomenally well. Equipments for like not more than 2,500 rupees are available online where you can actually see these short clips that are experiences. Is it going to be an additional, like a 3D experience? Yes, it might be. It will take its time here because we need the kind of spaces to exhibit that format. But yeah, what do I say? Eventually it's all going to go there. It's like film is becoming like the hand telephone and like digital is becoming the mobile. I mean, it's just the way it's going to be.
Right. So, I mean, staying on with this, so would you as a filmmaker be interested in making something, say, virtual reality, and what's the kind of content you think which would...
Girish, I'm interested in being relevant. So whatever is contemporary and whatever exists as a format today, there's no way that I want to be taking a back step in where something is leaping forward. Be it going the digital way, it was immediate at our end. We changed all our films. You know, I'm not somebody who, while I want to protect the content as much as I can, but to take giant leaps in technology is being relevant. And being relevant is the essence of a filmmaker in today's times. So yes, if 3D is a format, it's like we're making a film which Ayan Mukherjee directs with Ranbir, and it's a mystical experience, and he's been prepping on it for a year and a half. Now that film could lend itself to 3D. Right. We could look at virtual reality with it as an additional add-on experience. Right. All that and more, because it's a film that is made in 3 parts. So again, it's a trilogy. And all that can happen to that film. But say I release a film called Ae Dil Hai Mushkil, which comes out at Diwali, it doesn't warrant itself to anything but the 2D experience you get. Right. So every cinema experience, it depends on the genre of the film that it belongs to.
Understand. Fair enough. The other point, just to then take the whole sort of process forward really, then comes to monetization and distribution, right? And one of the key changes in technology which sort of significantly enhanced theatrical distribution was digitization of screens, right? Just your thoughts around that. While I guess we are at the fag end of the entire process and we are pretty much largely digitized, right? But how has that again, impacted you as a production house over the last say 5 years or so?
It's speed and efficiency.
Right.
It's much easier. Steel dabbas don't have to go from one place to the other. I remember, I've come from a generation where I've seen my father take those steel cans, to temples to pray right before the release, which have our film stickers on it, reel number 1, reel number 2, like literally cans. I've seen that happen in front of me. I feel blessed that I've been through this journey of seeing these steel cans that go to temples to now literally chips going into like equipment to see a film. So it's a card, it's a code. We actually, you could call it that we would reduce to a code now. We're just like everything else, we're a number. We're no longer a detail.
So, can you give us some context? So, let's say, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai when it released. How many prints, how many screens were there, and say, Ae Dil Hai Mushkil, what are we talking about?
We're talking 20 times, 150 to 200 to now 2,500 to 3,000.
And that's a straight multiplication on your collections and your revenues.
Not really. Do you know footfalls for more than?
Is it?
Yes,
okay.
It's a true. It's a hashtag true story.
Right.
Give you data. Agnipath film released in 1990.
Right.
Box office status, flop.
Right.
Agnipath released 2011. Box office status, super hit.
Right.
Data, more people saw Agnipath in 1990 than they did in 2011. That is considered a flop. This is considered a super hit.
Right.
So just to tell you that multiplex pricing, all that has eaten into the footfalls.
Right.
We're reduced by 40 to 45% reduction of footfalls than what was 2 decades ago. So our prints, our number of screens have increased, but the people watching movies have reduced by 40%.
Wow.
That meant that the single screen audience, where it was more economical to view films, obviously, because we are a country that has diverse economic situations for people. And the multiplex pricings do stop a humongous section of people from visiting cinema halls.
Right.
Like now to get an opening on a Friday is much more challenging because of just the fact that our footfalls are down by 40%.
Right.
And let me tell you that 40% is going to keep dropping because somewhere our core content is becoming more urban and we are losing heartland numbers.
Right.
So box office is taking a beating, which is why there's so much talk about the studio system shifting, etc. And it's going back to brass tacks in terms of solo, single, boutique production houses and producers who understand the essence of the box office and where it is. But that's, as I said, a separate topic.
No, I agree. This has a lot of other connotations around.
It totally does. But digital is being empowered in other ways.
Right.
I mean, you know, we have like the advent of short films, the advent of web series, the advent of digital content.
Right.
Online is becoming king. And I said it somewhere, and I feel very sad that eventually television might be like the scary mother-in-law, and digital will be the patriarch parent, and film will be the troubled child who will be desperately in need of therapy. So that's where we're heading.
Just in this context, there's this whole aspect around windowing, and this is particularly more relevant given the advent of digital, right? And there are conversations happening, particularly with Hollywood studios, to say, can we do a day and date release on digital or close enough? How do you view that, and what do you see potentially as, pluses and minuses or something like that happening?
Day and date would destroy the theatrical possibilities. We now have, of course, partners like Amazon who have entered the fray.
Yeah.
And of course, there is an internal deal about when we can go digital with the film. There's also the satellite transmission that is critical. There is then the digital. There is also the theatrical you have to look at. So things have changed. The climate, as we call it, has changed drastically. None of these were like impediments earlier. And now you have to think that, okay, we'll go digital first and then we'll go television, or vice versa. It depends. We have to kind of keep. But it is impacting. Definitely, there's additional revenue because now you have digital money coming in as well, which is an additional form of your recovery. We earlier had the music. We had theatrical distribution, diaspora and India, and we had satellite. Now we have digital. So it's an add-on. But there are other ramifications and repercussions.
So moving on, right? So post theatrical release, right now, and this is I guess where really social media comes in, and the impact of social media, the fact that reviews, views, responses are really real time. Again, as a filmmaker, what does this really mean for you? And how do you react to such responses with social media comments and reviews happening?
I mean, it's very scary because we're the only industry, I would say the only business where what we do gets judged globally on that morning. I mean, immediately you have like content being filtered through all social media platforms, be it Twitter, Facebook, and other such platforms that are lesser perhaps, but exist. It's ridiculously scary for a filmmaker who nobody else. You launch a product anywhere else in the world, it takes a week, 2 weeks, a month, some months for it to really kind of get some kind of feedback. Here you release a film and millions of people are talking about your work on day one. You have people live tweeting now, so who's watching films anymore? People are live tweeting reviews. I've never heard of something more ridiculous. Because how can you be tweeting about a film while watching it and yet feel the experience of a cinema viewing? So it's scary, I mean, and then of course you have trolling on Twitter, you open your mouth and you have like 3 million people who have opinions who kind of go at you. You have to have nerves of steel to exist in this digital age, to exist in this age of social media. To be on Twitter and be a celebrity, let me tell you, is no fun at all. Because you have dark, deep, unhappy people venting their deepest, darkest insecurities and lumbering it on you, literally trusting it on you, and all you have to do is
trolling, and there's no way to get back at that.
You don't know them. They are faceless, they are nameless, and you just are vulnerable. There is nothing else you can do.
Scary. Then let me, talk about maybe a couple of more other sort of aspects which I guess potentially has sort of risks placing limitations around creativity. One of them is around big data and data analytics and the kind of efforts that are being put in around analytics to really figure out what's the kind of content a user really likes to watch, and particularly around, say for example, something like a Netflix, which has got an abundance of data around what's the kind of content a user watches, which then determines the kind of movies and content they make. How do you see that?
I don't understand data. Of course, as I said, relevance is the order of the day. So I remain relevant by, of course, listening to research, listening to all the data that comes in. But I still don't know what my mother wants. So how do I know what the average Indian wants? You know, it's really difficult to kind of analyze it. You keep getting TG, this is your TG. Male skew, female skew, family skew, 18 to 34. You know, is your one, 18 to 24 is one TG, 35 to 44 is your second TG.
Right.
Below that, of course, there's something called QC, there's something called ESP, and these are all given to you. We have a leading research and analytical group called ORMAX.
Yeah.
It gives us FDO, as in first day box office predictions. And we start hyperventilating about that number because we have it.
How often have they been right?
They're quite right. I have to say, in the last couple of years, they've been bang on.
Right.
But somehow that fun of discovery of your early morning release in the movie, or in the movie field, like when you have a morning of release and you like, has my film received? Somehow you already are expecting a range.
Right.
So sometimes you are open to disappointment or then open to fear. One of the two keep happening in your zone. It's a bit scary. All that is a bit scary. So it's daunting. It's sometimes, but you get the data and you get something called reach. You have reach, interest, appeal, buzz.
Right.
These are the parameters.
Right.
So sometimes I try to ask myself, what is the difference between appeal and interest?
Right.
And I've understood that appeal is like told data and interest is when you're not told, and then you give whether you
Right.
want to see the film or not.
Right.
So there's a difference between appeal and interest. Where I come from, appeal and interest being the same thing.
Right.
And reach and buzz, I said, what is the difference between that? So there is, and the guys who do it, understand it, and are probably all right because they've been bang on for a lot of years.
Right,
90% success rate, which is great. But it's daunting for a filmmaker where we're sitting with all this data. All you made is a film. You made a film with your heart, you made a film with your conviction, and then you have like corporate heads telling you all this, and they're making sense, which is so annoying. Because you know, sometimes like they are breaking it down, and yes, sometimes you could be poetic and romantic and romanticize the situation and say, look, we don't need to listen, this is my conviction. But it's not my money.
Right.
How can I have conviction? If I had my own money, I wouldn't need to listen to anybody.
Right.
If I was just putting my own money and putting it on chance, of course I can do what I want. But the moment somebody else's money is riding on you, then
Right.
you're accountable and you bloody well listen to reach, availability, accessibility, interest, appeal, whatever the hell they tell you, you have to listen to it and act accordingly. Then suddenly I'm told like, oh, your male skew needs to increase. So I'm like, what do I do? Put more men in my film. No, it doesn't work like that. You know, you probably have to kind of then make sure you amplify the female reach,
Right.
so that that reaches a high enough number. So there are organic, there are holistic ways of looking at everything, and you have to just do what you do.
Fair enough. The last thing I also, this sort of a similar context is, so with Fast and Furious there was this, situation where, post Paul Walker's death, the last few scenes they actually recreated his image through CGI, right? And, and he was therefore shown as being present in those scenes. People are saying, does this mean 5-10 years down the line when the technology evolves enough, will that be the death of actors?
I don't think so.
Right.
It's like saying digital came and film died.
Right.
No, the actors will never die. They are the crowning glory of our cinema, especially in India. They are mega movie stars. We love them, we adore them, we put them up on pedestals, we like them to keep them there. No computer graphic can take away the magic and magnitude of movie stardom.
Right.
I don't think that can ever go, and I don't think we want it to either. Yes, what happened with Paul Walker was unfortunate, and the usage again for emotional connection with the character, how they used it towards the end of the film, just because you wanted to say that final goodbye to an actor who was part of a franchise. Brilliant usage, emotional. I was moved in Fast and Furious for the first time in my entire life. I couldn't believe I had a tear in my eye.
Emotional is not what you would connect with that movie.
You don't. And yet you had a tear in your eye. And that film went on to break every Fast and the Furious record. And because there was emotion. And again, it takes me back to where we all began, Girish.
Right.
Is that eventually computer graphic with the use of, with the platform of emotion can really be truly leveraged on a larger level.
Fair enough. We're sort of running out of time. We have time for questions or? Okay, I guess not. So great. Thank you so much, really for all your insights on this.
No,
and I guess things as technology evolves will get both very interesting as also more challenging, as things progress. Right?
But it is, digital is the future, and I think walking the digital path is, I think, the order of the day, and I bless film always, and I hope that digital will have its hand on film forever.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your insights and your time.
Thanks. Thank you.
Once again, a big thank you to Mr. Karan Johar and Mr. Girish Menon for the fireside chat. We didn't have a fire, but we had a lot going. Gentlemen, if you could stay on stage for a couple of seconds, I'd like to invite Archana Tiwari Naidu, Head Content TCL, to give away a memento as a token of appreciation to Mr. Karan Johar,